Nisrine.
Hi.
Hi, thank you for being on my podcast.
Of course.
Okay, so we need to talk about how we know each other.
Oh.
We have a mutual friend.
We do.
His name is Joshua.
No. Yes. It is Joshua. I just don't claim him, so.
I remember the first time we met, we were at Plank in Oakland. Do you remember this?
Which night? Remind me.
I can't remember, but it was the night that the Warriors were playing.
Oh, absolutely.
It was
I do remember
a year or
it.
two ago.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And this beautiful woman with green eyes and dark hair, which is you, approached us.
She
and
has
was
to
like,
say
hey,
I'm pretty.
Hey,
she has
come
to.
over here. Come over by our table. And I was like, okay, cool. I don't know who this person is. I think it's someone Josh knows, but okay, fine. And we're hanging out, can't really hear each other. We're friends. We're friends.
Aww.
And that was pretty much it. And then I realized you were smart.
I don't know that I'm smart, but I'm not dumb.
Yeah, you're not dumb.
So it's a middle ground. It's a middle ground.
For sure.
Yeah.
We talked, and I was like, oh, this lady's so smart. You work in pharmaceuticals.
First of all, can I say what I thought of you when I first met you?
Yeah, please tell me what you thought of me.
Of course, I think you're beautiful. I think that's obvious. People have seen you.
Thank you.
More importantly, smart,
yes.
funny,
Thank
kind, engaging. So I was like,
I try.
Okay, we're going to be friends.
I try.
Yeah, so it was nice to meet you, and I'm pumped that we're still friends.
What company do you work for?
I work for a company called Biogen. So they've been a pretty career-long goal for me. So I've been in the industry. I'm entering my 14th year in March. I'm not old, everybody. I'm 37. I just want to clarify that I'm 37, but this is my 14th year. The reason that they were kind of a long-term goal for me was because they make 5 products for a disease state called multiple sclerosis, which is neurodegenerative and autoimmune. And that is the reason that I'm in the U.S. So my mother was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. I was young, so it's huge for me. I sit on, the board of the MS Society.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's a big deal for me. She was prescribed one of Biogen's drugs. We were paying cash for a drug called beta-seron. And these drugs are usually about almost $100,000 a year.
Ooh-wee.
So, but this was a long time ago. First drug launched in 93. And so it probably wasn't that much then, maybe more like $3,000 a month. And they let us pay cash for it because when you immigrate prior to the pre-existing conditions clause, thank you, President Obama, right? Prior to that, you would have to just pay for stuff cash. So my dad was paying for beta-seron cash. When she was prescribed a Biogen drug, a case manager reached out to us to let us know that they were not going to allow us to pay for it. It was the first time that we had somebody reach out and call us and say, it's not really fair that you guys are paying cash for this medication. We would like to take care of the cost completely. And I was probably... Gosh, I couldn't have been older than 16 when that happened, and it left a huge mark on me. So I was like, someday I'm going to work for these people.
Yeah.
And I applied about 8 times before I even got an interview.
You didn't give up.
I didn't. And then I met my manager, and it was love it, first interview.
Wait, why didn't you give up? After the second time, the 4th time, the 7th time, why didn't you give up?
I think because they're special to me. Those people are very special to me. And now that I'm with them, I see them do things for patients that I've never seen another company do. And it makes me feel like I'm not just going to work, but it's part of a philanthropic effort. And I get to be there for people.
You were
and
determined.
I was extremely determined. And then once I finally did get, the first few times I applied, they didn't even interview me. So once I got an interview, the first time I got an interview, I actually got the job. And I hope I stay with them until I'm done in the industry.
Absolutely.
That's the goal, to work with people with MS until the wheels fall off. I eventually will go to work. I mean, I think you know this, but my family has kind of built over the years that we've been in the U.S. Nammour's Incorporated. So I think eventually I will end up there, of course. I don't think I'll stay with Biogen forever, but I think as long as I can make a difference for people that have multiple sclerosis, that are struggling and are sad, and I can cry with them and we can share these stories, I'm going to do it. So that's why. Do you have
any personal stories yet since you've been there?
Definitely.
Aside from your own?
Definitely. People will come up and hug me and cry. I've had people at, patient programs start crying and just kind of say, I don't want to be in a wheelchair. And so for me, it is hard. There's a lot of it. I've cried. There's been more than once that I've been at a patient program and bawled my eyes out, and it's embarrassing, but I think it connects so well with the patients because they know that somebody actually is not just in these physicians' offices trying to sell something.
Absolutely.
If somebody else's product is the better choice for the patient, that is what I want the patient to get. But I believe so much in how committed we are to people with multiple sclerosis that I feel good. I wake up every single day. I'm so excited to go to work. It's amazing. I couldn't ask for more.
And now you live in Fresno.
I do.
Yeah, and we follow each other on Snapchat.
Faux show.
And I, not like too many weeks ago, saw you snapping about a woman who was in front of Starbucks.
Yes.
Who was asking for food or like some resources. Can you elaborate on that story a little bit more?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for watching it. I think it was like 10 snaps deep, but it was such
there were a lot of snaps.
It was a very conflicted moment, though.
You kind of prefaced it by like, I don't usually do this, but, and I was like, okay, I have to watch this.
It was a very tough moment because I think I've heard so many people's perspectives on if you do things for homeless people, are you enabling them? Right. I think I'm an enabler by nature. If somebody has a problem, my first instinct is not to like teach them how to fish, but more so like, how can I solve your problem? Mm-hmm. So now I have to try to take pause when I want to solve somebody else's problem because it's a short-term fix. And so I was in Merced, California, which is a pretty impoverished area. Mm-hmm. I can say that for a million different reasons. I was at the Starbucks, which Starbucks is quite a luxury. And so I was walking in and I see this woman and she stops me and I will always, the first thing I do when I see somebody who is homeless, I make eye contact. Because I want them to have the opportunity to...
Eye contact is key.
Right. Like, I want you to say something to me if you need to say something.
Right.
And so she says to me, ma'am, can you please buy me some food? And I was like, she didn't ask me for money. I thought that was kind of the first thing that stood out to me. And I said, would you like some coffee as well? And she was like, I do. So I kind of got her complete order. And I go inside. And the first thing that happens when I come in and I start ordering is the barista behind the counter says to me, can you just do me a favor and not buy that woman food? And I was like, okay, no is the answer. First of all, no, absolutely not. I'm going to buy her some food.
Right, of course.
But I'd love to hear why you don't want me to buy her food.
Yeah.
So we place the order, and then she says to me, this woman comes in, and she says that they try to work with homeless people. That's what she said. We try to let them use the restroom. We try to keep them warm. But this particular woman comes in and yells at us on a regular. So I was like, okay, I don't want the people at Starbucks being yelled at. So I get her food and I walk out and I asked her if I could sit down. It was kind of an interesting moment.
Yeah, I bet.
Because I don't think that she's used to people.
Not a lot of people do.
Right. So I was like, do you mind? So I gave her the food and the drink and I said, do you mind if I sit with you for a second? And she said, yes. And so I said, I need you to do me a favor. These people want to work with you. They want to keep you warm and let you use their facilities, but you cannot yell at them. They're just trying to do their job. And she was super confused. She had no clue what I was talking about. She said she has never yelled at them or anybody else. Yeah. So she said, that's not even her. That's not my personality. I would never yell at anybody. And I mean, it was such a tough moment for me. And so then she proceeded to tell me, point being, she divulged that she was going to Santa Cruz to go to a rehab program that is for women that are addicted to drugs and alcohol, but furthermore have some sort of,
mental health issues.
Whether it's bipolar or schizophrenia or, dissociative identity disorder, I could go on.
Right.
Point being that she said she was bipolar. Mm-hmm. And so I thought to myself, the people that are inside of Starbucks, and I understand it, nobody wants to be yelled at, but they're judging this woman, and I don't think that they know at all where she's coming from.
Right.
And I think that's part of the disease that has become just kind of general society in the U.S.
Right.
Is to kind of jump on somebody, judge something, not want to help somebody before understanding the full.
Absolutely.
So that was a huge takeaway for me with this woman, because if somebody is bipolar, quite honestly, I don't know that she remembers yelling at these people. She could have, or she could have not. But if more people were willing to step outside of themselves and not always be the me show,
right,
I think we'd be in a better place. So,
absolutely.
So she was getting on a bus the next day to go to Santa Cruz and get some help.
I saw you a few weeks ago at SantaCon.
I did.
And you're like, hey, so like, how's school going?
I am. It's over next year.
Whatever, no stop. You saw me, like, so what is like happening? Like, what could someone like this do? Like, where could she go? And I was like, honestly, I don't really know, because I mostly know about resources in Alameda County or San Francisco County. And like, what you're asking is more on a policy level, which,
of course,
in my first semester I'm not exactly like aware of.
Semester
I'm sorry.
number 4.
Yeah.
Come back
Semester
and
number
talk
4
to you.
we'll check in. Hopefully there's some kind of free public transportation program where she could access shelter services, like a warm meal, somewhere like a cot she could lay down on or something like that.
I really want to speak to your point about shelter. So I recently was actually talking to another woman. I think there's a misunderstanding amongst the general population, because I commonly hear things like, oh, why don't these people just go to shelters? There's no reason for them to be on the streets. And so it was explained to me by another homeless woman, if they do any sort of a drug at all, that they cannot stay in the shelter. So that, I think, eliminates many, many people, and we find shelters empty. And, you know, I think people see things so simply, like, okay, if homelessness really is a mental health issue, why don't they just get help? Not everybody's aware of the services that are available to them for help. I think that's actually a very privileged and luxury position to be in. Not everybody's in that position. Furthermore, you know, when it comes to rehab, I've got to share this with you. So, you know, I've told you that my brother spent a good amount of his life an alcoholic, and I think they say, you know, they still are, but he's totally sober. It's been years now for him. Right. But I remember we sent him to this rehab, and we brought in an interventionalist. So you as a family, you fly in this person. It's a very expensive, super expensive process. The interventionalist has you write letters, you sit down with the addict, you tell them why you think they should go to rehab, and then you send them away. And overnight, we had to pay these people at the rehab about, I think it was $40,000.
Wow.
So it's no small thing. It's not like this is something everybody has access to. But point being, my brother was there, I think, for 3 months and relapsed almost immediately when he came home. And he told me that within the rehab, the counselors themselves provided drugs, gave people alcohol. Yeah.
What?
Yep. So I think people look at this as such a simple fix, and that's because they're unable to look outside of themselves. It is a very, very difficult process for somebody that has become addicted to a substance, which may have started with a mental health issue, as far as my own personal theory, to actually get help and fix it. It's very, very difficult. So I just think we need to be more understanding and kind and aware, and as a society, just seek ways to help people struggling.
Totally. Like, what do you think would be like a feasible way to do that?
That's such a hard question. I genuinely think, and I think a lot of people would almost laugh at this, but I'm not sure why, that we need to reallocate our spending as a country. I think there's a lot of things that we spend like massive amounts of money on. One of them, for me, being a hot button, is just military and war spending. So I think you should seat your military in an appropriate position, but not be wasteful and not go to wars that you don't absolutely have to engage in, because that ends up costing billions of dollars. And if we took a fraction of just, and I'm talking about one thing, I'm talking about just war and military spending, and we reallocated it to whatever you think is relevant. I could speak to more education, access to more education. I think that would improve the problem. But also even just some of the models that we're now seeing in states like Washington, seeing places that are actually trying to support homeless people, put them in extremely small, almost shack-style homes, but you're giving them shelter. You're trying to set them on the right path, giving them the things that they need to go and seek out employment and education without the harsh restriction of you have to be completely clean before we help you, because that's not a reality, and it gets in between that individual who either has a drug or a mental health issue and their success. You know, I hope you don't mind me saying this on recording, but I think our president, Obama, I think was starting to set us on the right path. I think there was some flaws in policy that we could have worked out had we have continued in that vein of saying, we're going to help people in need, we're going to increase in education, we're going to meet people's basic needs so that they can thrive and do well and contribute to society. And once people become contributing members to society, that is when we thrive as a community.
I totally agree.
I think it's far more simple than people make it out to be. It's an issue of greed. It's an issue of tax cuts to billionaires, or this idea that we need to be this superpower with the world's biggest military, as China's flying past us, surely with a smaller military. So there's all of these different things that we could change And I don't think it would be as difficult as people perceive it to be now. But what we would need is to come together as a country. I am very much not convinced that the U.S. is ready to do that. I don't think that there is still a huge mindset of us versus them. And I've heard many people talk extremely negatively about people who are homeless. And when you say to them, I actually just completely lost a friendship over it because this girl was saying homeless people are worthless. And they choose this. This is what they want for themselves. Why would you help them? Why would you talk to them? They are worthless. And that was the last time that I spoke to that person because I literally just asked her, I said, hey, what % of that population would you say is either has a mental health issue or a drug or alcohol issue? And she said probably less than 10, 15%. And I literally, that is a dialogue that I cannot be a part of.
Right.
You know, it's that we versus them mentality that people who have had some level of privilege, which I don't think should be considered like a bad thing. Like you either kind of have a good upbringing and it's a little bit simpler or you don't. I don't think that makes the person who's privileged bad. I think they become the enemy, if you will, when that sort of ignorance starts to happen and they're trying to retain. I almost feel that there becomes an effort to retain the gap between them and the people who are not doing well. It's like they want to keep that difference. It almost empowers them or makes them feel more valuable. I think until people are willing to do that and to vote for, you know, that positive change and not just do it for 8 years, but, you know, keep that positive change moving in the right direction. I don't see how we can do it, but you see much poorer countries with far fewer resources crushing it. That's crazy to me. I think the U.S. needs to examine themselves.
The last question I have to ask you, what do you do for self-care?
The most obvious thing that I can say for sure is I've definitely seen a therapist, definitely, and they were extremely, extremely helpful to me. It was right after my mother passed away, and I was working with one of my managers, and this was kind of crazy, and this is not something I share often, but he told me, he said, you just forget stuff. You've never been like this before. You forget everything. I feel like there is some part of your brain that is starting to want to forget things, probably because of what you just went through. He's like, so I would really like for us to set you up. And it was actually really convenient because I was able to Skype with a therapist, which was amazing.
Oh, wonderful.
So I think I was actually Skyping with somebody from the East Coast, and she was extremely helpful. And we spent 2 hours a week engaging in conversation about leaving the struggles of my childhood, or, you know, seeing a sick mother, or being an immigrant, or being, you know, part of a war-ridden country, or seeing my brother struggle with addiction. That's a lot that builds up. And unless you are willing to manage it, I could end up in the position of that woman in front of Starbucks, because my manager could have been like, you're forgetting everything. You're not doing us any favors. You're fired. And then what happens next?
Right.
So I think self-care, definitely, if you need it or anybody you know needs it, it is available. It is far more reasonable now that we can Skype with these individuals. I don't think BI was paying more than $50 a session. And I think there's even less available out there. Therapy is huge, but for me, I think friends and family being like a sounding board and being a very consistent part of my life is huge. And commonly, because, you know, work can be stressful, I will do things for myself at the end of a hard work day. If I want to go just sit in my backyard, I bought a very green backyard. You've seen that. If I just want to go out there and stare at the greenery and just kind of feel like I'm a part of nature, even if it's only for 45 minutes, I go do it. I don't feel guilty.
No, we shouldn't. About taking care of ourselves.
Self-care is huge.
Thank you for being on my podcast.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I feel very special.
Aw. Bye.
Bye.